Talk right now about Rwanda. The European Court of Human Rights has been accused of undermining British sovereignty after granting an 11th-hour injunction to stop that flight to Rwanda for channel migrants. It was specifically concerned an Iraqi citizen who we've known only as KN, and it was stopped. And then it basically granted that injunction on the basis that they couldn't be sure that he would not be mistreated and would not have his human rights affected. Some governments and silence have said that basically you've got an unelected, unaccountable, even anonymous European judge basically overriding the British courts, and we've had judges looking at this in far more detail in the British courts, but also the British government. Well, let's talk about this with human rights lawyer Aamer Anwar, who joins us. Good morning to you, Aamer.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. There's lots of talk about whether or not we could withdraw from the European Court of Human Rights, withdraw from the European Convention of Human Rights. We must stress, of course, this isn't the European Court of Justice. This isn't the EU court. This was set up before the EU, 1950. Winston Churchill came up with the plan. There are 47 member states. Is it possible for us to withdraw from the European Convention or parts of it, or withdraw from the court's judgments entirely?
Well, it is possible. If we want to see what company we would keep, well, you had Greece that were temporarily withdrew after a military coup, and Russia, of course, after invading Ukraine. So that's the sort of company that we would be keeping. The European Convention of Court of Human Rights applies and protects the rights and guarantees set out in the convention, and it protects people from governments like ours. It's not just simply about asylum seekers. Of course, people have the right to a fair trial. People have a right not to be subjected to inhumane and degrading treatment. And if the question, I suppose, for this government is, if we're going to withdraw from the European Convention of Human Rights, what's next? Is it the Geneva Convention? There's a whole series of international laws.
It's this idea that if we're not in the European Convention of Human Rights, that somehow all of our rights disappear. We've been in the European Convention of Human Rights, and for the last 2 years, 18 months of that, people had the most extraordinary freedoms taken away from them. All apparently were completely within the law. I don't remember any human rights lawyers getting up and being upset and worried about that when, children were banned from going to school, and perfectly healthy people who'd had COVID were either all been vaccinated or both were banned from meeting up. I mean, we were banned. At one point, we had a £5,000 fine just for going to an airport intending to fly, not even getting on a flight. I mean, that's all happened while we've been in the European Convention of Human Rights.
I take your point, Julia. However, what I'd say to you is that that's exactly the reasons why we're required to have laws such as European Convention of Human Rights. It protects us from governments like ours that would abuse the rule of law. And one can only imagine if this convention was taken. And I suspect this is probably very much a case of electioneering, setting the groundwork in the future for the next election, as in saying, oh, look, this government wants to scrap the European Convention of Human Rights, and this is what this is about. What it means actually is it takes away from any protections that we have, the protections that we have taken to as almost guaranteed within this country. And it means that the police, the health service, which we saw, the abuses of the law that took place during the lockdown period, the various rights we take for granted wouldn't be taken for granted anymore.
Why do we need a European court?
Government?
Why do we need a European court to do that? I do find that extraordinary. I mean, again, in particular the case, if you look at these channel migrants, we looked into the High Court, the Appeal Court, looked at these cases in detail over a matter of days, and we know who those judges are. We can see, who they are and the information they were given. The European Court of Human Rights apparently looked at the newspaper reports and over a matter of hours made a decision, basically. And they didn't, to be fair, they didn't rule it unlawful, did it? They just wanted more time.
With respect, it's not a case of that these judges are anonymous judges. They're very eminent judges who sit there.
No, that's not true. The European Court of Human Rights has judges who appoint. Some of them are not even. They've never even had any experience being judges. They may be lawyers. Some are academics. They're not. No, these people are not eminent judges, and we haven't even been told which judge from which country made this decision.
The point at the end of the day is that this government stands accused of breaching the rule of law, of international law, that these individuals are human beings who are likely to be victims of torture. And the fact was that the government couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't be subjected to inhumane and degrading treatment. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about individuals who more than likely have suffered the same persecution, they've been in the same circumstances as, of course, Ukrainian asylum seekers have been, Ukrainian refugees who have have been welcomed into this country. I don't distinguish between the two.
I do.
And the government cannot guarantee their rights. That is why, well, you may well do, Julia. And probably the question I would ask you, Julia, what is the difference between somebody who's Ukrainian and somebody...
I'll tell you what, we have a duty of care to the people of Ukraine. Our country signed a treaty, an international treaty, where we guarantee the independence and the safety of Ukraine. And we have a duty of care to those people. I don't have a duty of care to someone from Sudan.
We are also party to the European Convention on Human Rights, and until we are, we will have to obey the international rule of law. And over the past 5 days, we've had first there was 132, then it was 37, then it was 7, then it was 6, then it was 3, and then it was 2. And these people who are on this plane have been terrorized. They are human beings. They are victims of torture. Some of them are likely to have families here. They were described.
So what if they've got families here? So
why?
What?
Because we have a...
You can be married to a British person and not have a right to come to this country.
We have a convention that was written in the aftermath of the Holocaust to make sure that governments in Europe were not able to abuse the rule of law, and that that rule of law would be protected. That is why Greece was no longer kicked out of the European Convention on Human Rights. That is why Russia is no longer party to that. And that's the company that we want to draw. We really should be looking to see where our moral compass is going. This is a government that can't even be trusted not to party while our loved ones are dying. And yet we're going to be expecting to trust them on the question of human rights.
Okay. Right. Well, I'd love to get people's reaction to that. Aamer Anwar, a human rights lawyer. Thank you very much indeed.